Good morning and happy Wednesday to you. Hope this finds you well and cheerful today. Well, welcome to Penn Vicarage. Hope you're looking forward to a good day. I know I certainly am. I'm sure it's a good day in God's presence, and today, whatever you've got planned, hope you enjoy it. Now, we're picking up the theme in the Acts of the Apostles. So far, what's happened is that Jesus has died, he's risen again, he's ascended into heaven. They've replaced Judas with Matthias, and now they're waiting for the day of Pentecost. Now, Pentecost I should explain, is not a new thing for the church, actually. Prior to that, it had been the Jewish equivalent of the Harvest Festival. So lots of people were in town anyway. Jesus had told his disciples to wait in Jerusalem to receive power on high. And when power from on high came, power came from on high. I'll read you now, it's quite a long reading. It's Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, and reading verses 1 to 21. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all, disciples, were together in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared on them, and a tongue rested on each one of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak in other languages, as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven, living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd was gathered and was bewildered, because each of them heard them speaking in their native language of each. Amazed and astonished they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us, in our own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, in our own languages we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power." All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." But Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. "Men of Judea, and all who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk as you suppose, for it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what's written through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, on those days I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show portents in the heaven above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, long reading there, and there's an awful lot that I could say. I think the first thing I want to say is I always chuckle to myself when it says they can't be drunk because it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Drink wasn't as strong in those days as it is now, because some people, you can still be caught drinking and driving 9 o'clock in the morning, believe me, but that's another story for another day. I said before that one of the great themes of the Gospel of Luke is that things start small and things get big. And I think there's probably not a chapter in the Bible where there's more so than this. I think when you think Acts chapter 2, think volume pedal whacked up, and that's what you've got to think. Then there's the huge, great turning up of the volume. And everything, think turning up volume, think abundance, think massive quantities. And that's what you've got on the Acts of the Apostles chapter 2. That's what you've got in Pentecost. A huge, great turning up of the volume. So, the numbers of the people that you see. It's interesting that at the time there were people there from all those funny places, which are quite difficult to say, and you always hope you didn't get that reading when it's from the Sunday morning, from Cappadocia and all sort of places. You've got people coming from they're all in town in Jerusalem because it's Pentecost. And so you get the gospel being taken by them into huge numbers of lands across the world. So you've got an expanse of the gospel, not just from Jerusalem, but because all these people see this, they can take it out. So again, you see the gospel being widened in its preaching. But also in terms of the Holy Spirit. Prior to this point, all through the Old Testament, the Holy Spirit had come on particular people at particular times for particular purposes. Like Samson had got strength, Gideon had got leadership, Bezalel had got artistic ability, Talked about those a few weeks ago. The Holy Spirit will come on particular people at particular times. And even in the New Testament, beginning of it, people like John the Baptist, 1 or 2 individuals received the Holy Spirit. What you've got now is you've got a massive turning up of the volume. Because the Spirit prophesied that it would come on all flesh. So you get this prophet Joel, that the Holy Spirit no longer just for 1 or 2 individuals, but you get for old and young. Your old men will see visions and your young men will dream dreams. So young and old all getting involved with it. Men and women, slave and free, old and everyone gets involved because the Holy Spirit comes on all flesh. So it's not just for a few people at particular times. From Pentecost onwards, the Holy Spirit is there for everyone. So you see a massive great turning up of the volume in terms of who receives the Spirit. Not just 1 or 2 people, but the Holy Spirit gets blitzed on loads of people. But it's not just the number of people who get filled with the Spirit too. It's the quantity of Holy Spirit too. Instead of just a bit, you've got people being absolutely overwhelmed. The word baptize, the word baptizo, which comes from the Greek, means to immerse, to overwhelm. As somebody once said, when a ship gets sunk in the ocean and it goes to the bottom of the sea, it fills with water, it gets baptized with water. The water we use at baptism service is symbolic for the Holy Spirit overwhelming, the Holy Spirit coming upon, absolutely overwhelmed, being immersed and filled with the Spirit. So when these disciples get filled with the Spirit, they see divided tongues and rushing winds, big quantities of abundance, not just a bit of the Holy Spirit, but a pouring out, a drenching, absolutely overwhelming with the Holy Spirit. So on this day of Pentecost, when which we call often the church's birthday, okay, when the disciples were filled with power from on high, what you've got to think is a turning up of the volume, a drenching, a massive outpouring. So the Holy Spirit is taken, as Lucas says, to all those nations across the world. The gospel's taken all these people into our witnessing what happens. So you've got a massive expansion of the preaching of the gospel. Secondly, you've got the Holy Spirit not coming on 1 or 2 people, but coming on loads and loads and loads, all flesh, old, young, men, women, slave, free. Everyone gets the Spirit. But finally, not just numbers, but also quantity, a drenching, and not just a touching, but a filling, a baptizing, an absolute immersion in the Holy Spirit. And that's what you got at Pentecost. So on this fantastic day, which frankly in churches we just don't celebrate enough because we should rejoice in it more, think massive turning up of the volume, think expansion of the gospel, think Holy Spirit on everybody, and think Holy Spirit being poured and immersed and drenched everyone. It's good, friends. It's good. Acts chapter 2, good chapter. Read it at your leisure. It's great. But think, Holy Spirit, lots of, good quality, good quantity on everybody, including you and me. God bless you and have a lovely day.